Okay, quick update. It's Wednesday morning on my way to Greensboro. It's been kind of frustrating here lately thinking about my relationship with my wife. On Saturday, I had spent some time we got stuck in a rainstorm on Saturday afternoon while our son was visiting. It poured balls. I mean, it just rained and rained, and it was quite an unusual storm. Some places around got hail and ice and all kinds of stuff. But we had gone out to get pizzas from two different places, a cheese and a pepperoni from two different places that we like to go to kind of like have a final taste test, type thing while our son was here. So it was fun. And finding out, especially, it's different when you have the two pizzas right there to compare them than if you just order it, because pizza always seems good, even if it's kind of crappy. So it was interesting to find out which one we liked better. But while we were stuck in the rainstorm, waiting to go inside, I had kind of told Jessica just some of the things that I've been, shared some of my heart with her, about, what am I supposed to do? It feels like, I try to talk to her, I invite conversation, and I don't get it. Like on this past Sunday morning, before we went to church, she was clearly upset about something, and I assumed it was the stuff that I said to her Saturday night, just kind of feeling like we're spinning our wheels here. We've been in marriage couples therapy for 2.5 years and nothing's really changed. Are we just roommates? And expressing the idea that she doesn't really talk to me that much. So that was Saturday night. Sunday, and that I feel disrespected in our house. And that's been a long-term thing. It's stuff I've talked about over and over and over again. But she either doesn't really believe it's a problem, or she thinks my perspective's just wrong. Like that's the latest, greatest way of dismissing someone in our culture in general, and in my relationship in particular, is to say, well, you have a right to your perspective. Yeah. Well, is it factual or is it not? Is it rooted in reality? Is the perspective reality or not? Because if it's not reality, then I don't care whether you have a right to your perspective. Where's reality stand? Where's truth? And I know things aren't that black and white. I understand the complicated nature of things. But anyways, on Sunday morning, she was clearly upset about some of the things that I had said. I just kind of said these things. And typically she doesn't respond when I do say these things, when I do express concerns or needs or whatever. Most of the time she doesn't respond. But I could tell on Sunday morning when she went out to walk the dogs, when she came back in, I could tell she'd been crying. She looked upset. And so I asked her, I was like, so what's going on with you? And I got nothing. And then we went to church. She cried at church. Our son cried at church. Everybody was crying at church. And so, for example, I asked my son, Garrett, well, why were you crying? What were you thinking about when you were at church? And he was like, I was just overwhelmed with thankfulness to the Lord for all the good things that God's done for me. He just could spell it out like that. Most of the time I ask my wife a question like that, I get nothing in return. And she never volunteers it. I have to pull it out. And that's really the dynamic that's got me so frustrated. is feeling like I have to pull it out. So last night I was watching some TV. There was a documentary on that I really didn't care about, some true crime thing, and it was just on. Sometimes I flip the TV on just to eat dinner or whatever, and I'm not really that interested or tied to it. And so I wasn't really watching it very carefully. What I was doing was looking at her, and for the course of a couple hours, she was looking at her phone, grinning, smiling. It was clear that she was texting somebody. I'm assuming a lady from church or, some contact of hers. But the point is, like, my wife shares her heart and she's intimate with other people. She shares her feelings and her thoughts and all her inner workings with other people, but she doesn't share it with me. And she's always said, oh, it's because you're so mean and scary and I don't feel safe with you. Well, then our relationship's over. I mean, it's so simple to me. That means there's not going to be a romantic or even just on basic rudimentary level, a marriage relationship the way the Bible talks about. And I don't mean like agreement. I mean like where you're just not sharing of yourself. You're withholding yourself. And that happened, that's happened throughout our relationship. I've talked before about, sex and our marriage. My wife shamed me for years and years for stuff that was natural and that God intended. And made assumptions and saw me in a bad light that wasn't reality. And blamed, basically that I wouldn't, and instead of like, or would say, oh, this is a deficiency in me. If you're not happy with the way things are, then there's a deficiency in me. It's like I'm not good enough, So that right there means, okay, I can't talk about these things then. And I have a very hard time in the absence of sexuality, in the absence of conversation, intimate, just sharing things, whatever it is that she shares with other people that she doesn't share with me. How is that? I mean, how are you supposed to say I love you at the end of the day or when you're leaving for work? I mean, because you don't. Your actions are just not matching up with what you're saying. So you might have this. You might be like, oh, I love this previous version of you or this fantasy version of you that I had in my head for years that I hoped would become. I mean, like, it's gruesome to say, but like for most of my life, because I haven't had a normal sexual relationship with her, for most of my life, my brain has been in fantasy. It's been like trying to imagine the type of woman that I would like to be with. But it's her. I mean, like when I fantasize or whatever, I'm fantasizing about her, but it's not her as she really is. It's her as I wish, as someone who wants to please me and cares about my thoughts and feelings. And I just find it so tragic, It's like you look. I'm almost 50 years old. I'm gonna be 49 this year, and like so, a lot of the opportunities for the fun and the magic to happen and the stuff, the normal progression. It's kind of like my childhood. I was robbed of my childhood, and I was robbed of joy in marriage. I was robbed of normal expression and intimacy, and I just don't know. It's like you feel a grief, and I don't know how to cope with that. I don't know what God wants me to do, being that this has been my situation. I mean, how long do I stay in therapy? How long do I put up this and the thing is, like, this pretense, not pretense, but just waiting, like, okay, something, and that's the way Jessica's always been. It's like, oh, in the future things are going to be better magically, we're going to become different people, and it's, of course, it's ridiculous, but haven't been, it's 26 years now, in November, 26 years we've been married. And this dynamic has never changed. It first surfaced before we were married. And she was pregnant. We were both believers, so I was like, well, she was fairly new believer, but it was clear to me that she loved Jesus, that God loved her, and that there was a desire there. But then, what I was thinking about? Like the very first, when we were sort of like planning our wedding, this is an offense that's never gone away because it's persisted. The dynamic has persisted. I said, I'd really prefer something small. Like, I really don't want to invite everyone and their mother, like cousins and people that I don't even talk to, aunts, uncles, people that I don't see or talk to at all, and barely know, really. Why do we have to have this big rigmarole? But I was overridden, overrode, whatever. I said, I'd just like to have a quiet affair on the beach with a few of our close friends, the people that really love us, our parents, and let's just keep it, low key. Well, that just didn't fly. So right away, I should have been like, okay, I'm just being dismissed. I'm just not being, my desires are really not being considered. And I was thinking about, her father and how her father affected our marriage, how he has affected my life. I wonder sometimes, I had my son here, he's married, got married at 19, and he was here this weekend. I'm like, I wonder, how much I've affected his life. Because, you just don't realize it, when you're raising kids, that you're affecting future kids. You're affecting future relationships. If Mariah, my son's wife, if there's anything that she likes about my son, a lot of that has to do with his dad. And it's really interesting, they've done studies about faith and how the kids tend to follow their father. So whatever their father's view on faith is, that's the way they tend to go. And I was just thinking about father's influence, but I was thinking about Jessica's father and how he molested her, and he told her things like he said, I have to teach you how to be a good wife. That's part of what he said while in the act. Or he told her, he kind of came up with the idea that she needed to be a career woman, that she needed to, use her talents and expressions and move into a career, so that when we got married, my wife went into a freaking spiral of depression at the thought of being a mother. And that was her father's doing. And I think the frigidity and the avoidance of sexuality and intimacy and the fear of all that came from him, obviously. And for years and years, she's denied that influence. In fact, she said that I'm worse than him. So I'm, in her mind, the way that she thinks, I'm worse than the guy who molested his own kid. And I've done more damage to her. And it's just nonsensical. It's a world that I just don't know how to live in. So I keep trying to have these conversations and things like that, and I'm just wondering, should I just forgive myself this debt or whatever this is, this Christian guilt, that this desire in me to have this relationship that's just not going to be. It's just not going to be. For whatever reason, whether it's fear or inability to let go of the past or whatever it is in me or her, this thing just doesn't seem to be. So I feel this expectation And I kind of feel like, well, if I give up and she gives up, then there's no way we'll stay together, you know. And the thing is, like, we need each other, like, financially right now. Neither one of us, I think, could really function, could live on our own and afford things, you know. And I know there's a lot of people, a lot of couples like that. So it's just a lot swirling around, and I was sitting there and I just felt hurt. And then, like, I went to bed at like 9 o'clock, closed the door. I often go to bed by myself. And then the lights were on, and it was like midnight, and I went out and she was doing work, you know, like she was working. So, wow, what a challenge. Marriage. So I'm headed to work. It's an intake day. Probably be pretty busy. I hope it'll be busy. My knee is feeling much better. I skipped out on PT yesterday. I think I'm just going to cancel the rest of those appointments. I was telling Jessica that PT is one of those things, you can get all the information you need online now. It's not like the surgery itself. It's something that you can go find the information. You really don't need to pay for it. A lot of it you can do without equipment, or you can just go, you know, to a gym and find equipment to do the exercises. So I don't think I'll go to any more of those. And everybody seems to be looking forward to Bonnaroo coming up rather quickly. Guess we're about 3 weeks away from that. So other than these thoughts here last night and this morning and ongoing throughout my life, things are going pretty well. I'm going to close here and focus on prayer and listen to the word for a while.